maybe a week or two ago, before we signed the Gerd, I did a video and I was getting a bit worried. About how we were doing, in the transfer window, what our transfer window strategy was, all that sort of thing. I said basically we needed some good news. As fans, we probably needed a little transfer just to take the edge off, stop us worrying a little bit. And it came, it arrived. It was tangible. You could see the mood lift amongst the fans in the comments section, amongst myself certainly, when we made the signing. Then the Areola signing followed. Whilst it wasn't like a new signing, it did enable us to worry about one less thing. Well, boys and girls, I'm feeling that we're back. I certainly would like another signing now to sort of take the edge off because, and again, it's news, it's transfer rumours, but if you read everything, and pretty much everything at the moment would suggest we're missing out on a lot of our targets. Now, I've mentioned a few times on here, some of our most recent signings, they've been in the news before we've signed them. I used the example of Zuma, Areola, I'm talking about the first time we signed him, and then recently a Gerd. Basically, all the news stories, newspapers, all the West Ham websites are talking about a Gerd for 3 weeks, a month before we signed him. So, if you agree with that, then it's safe to assume that one of the people that we're discussing at the moment, be it Danjuma, Lewis Potter, Broja, and any number of those, are players we are interested in. Sometimes it just leaks out into the news. I think it's usually agents that do it. However, it does seem that on a few of those targets, there's other clubs interested and we're being pipped to the post. And I will use the example of Lewis Potter as probably the biggest one. Now, we'll get to him in more detail in just a second, but it does appear that we're sort of gambling with our transfer strategy. And it's almost a transfer strategy which is foolproof and safe and involves lots of checks. However, I don't mean checks as in money checks. I mean lots of us, dotting every I and crossing every T and being really studious in the way we analyse a player and how the recruitment process goes. However, that process is really good if you factor out the other clubs. So that's all well and good. If you're the only club going for a player, then you can take as long as you want. But when other clubs are involved, maybe you just got to get a little bit of a hurry up on it. Now, I'm going to go off tangent slightly here, but hopefully you'll stay with me. If not, you'll leave now. So I was listening to the radio, and a tune came on the radio. When I say this, you're going to say, "What radio station were you listening to?" Basically, Kenny Rogers, the Gambler, came on. Now, you're probably not going to know the tune. I'd be surprised if 5 people in the comments turn around and say, "Oh yeah, we know that song." It's a country and western song. It's Kenny Rogers, and the tune is called "The Gambler." And the premise of the song is about an inexperienced gambler who's losing money. He doesn't really know what to do at the poker table, basically. And he meets an experienced gambler. And the experienced gambler basically gives him a load of advice. And that's the premise of the tune. And when I'm listening to this tune, David Moyes got into my head. And David Moyes was the inexperienced gambler. And I just couldn't shift it. And as I'm driving along, I'm changing the lyrics in my head. You see how mad I am. You understand this. And it's just a very, very interesting song. And it's about knowing when to play your hand, knowing when to walk away, knowing how to bluff, just all the nuances of gambling. And I was listening to it thinking, this is David Moyes, and I just think you're just not getting it, mate. You've got to be a little bit more smart and a little bit more savvy in the transfer window. So the Lewis Potter thing comes out. Now, it appears that Brentford have agreed a £20 million deal with Hull City. Now, it's been an obvious link because it's a path that's already been trodden by Jarrod Bowen. Now, when I've looked at him, I do think he probably suits our style. As you know, I've said this on numerous occasions. I think Fornells can't play left wing. I think when Ben Rama plays there, he slows up our play. I think he has too many touches. I think he stops the ball and then stands in front of his man, then tries to beat his man. We want someone just to run, knock the ball past someone and run onto it. And I've looked at Lewis Potter and I thought, okay, he probably suits our style really well. That being said, I don't think he's the best player in the world, but he's one of the better players in the Championship. And I think, probably too much pressure on the lads just because Bowen came from Hull City to think he'd be as good as Jarrod Bowen. It's a hell of an achievement to sign from a Championship club, go to a Premier League club and get the England squad within 2 seasons. But it doesn't have to be that good. But I do believe, for reasons I said at the start of the video, he probably is one of the players we were looking at. Even though I think it's an easy media link. And I look at it and I think, well, hold on a second. Have we honestly dithered and dillied and dallied so much that Brentford have come in? And we know Brentford know how to spot a good player. I think if Brentford are signing him, he probably is quite good. And I just wonder then if David Moyes is looking at it thinking, well, we've missed out on him. Because we're slow, because we're not... Because our gambling is crap. We're gambling on, if we leave it a long time, we can go back and we can get him. Well, you think, actually, you can't because someone else has gone and bought him. Anyway, look, before I go any further, this video is sponsored by the OneFootball app, which is packed full of West Ham transfer rumours, including the one I've just discussed, including the next 2 players I'm about to go on and discuss. The great thing about the OneFootball app, aside from the fact that it's free, is once you've downloaded it by using that link or that QR code up there, it will ask you which tournaments you want to follow and which teams you support. I say which teams. Which teams? I support Tottenham and Arsenal. No, you put West Ham and I put in England on there, and I don't bother with the tournament stuff because it gives me enough stories through that. All the transfer news, all the fixtures, all the injury news, any stories that involve West Ham in newspapers and websites, puts them all together in one place and delivers them to your phone. So the Lewis Potter one was on there, and it's sort of... I just read it and I thought, this is not particularly good. But then you've got the Danjuma thing, the Danjuma rumour as well. And I thought this was dead and buried the other day, but no, that's come up again. I'll get to Broja in just a second, but it's hard now for me to almost not trust anything, because it's not like I believe all this stuff anyway. But the Sonny Perkins thing as well, two reasons. Number one, I said I think we need another bit of good news. That was bad news. The only thing I can really hear back as an argument of it not being good news is when people say, well, he might not turn out to be a good player. Okay, I don't think that's a great argument because, as I said, I literally spoke to Tony Carr myself. It's on video. Tony Carr said he understands he's the best young player in our academy. Kevin Keane, the under-18 West Ham manager, it's not second-hand information, has said this is the best young player in our academy. It's really hard when that guy walks away to spin that as good news. It's not. I think it's bad. I think it's a blow to the club. It made me feel pretty gutted about it, really. So that's what I'm saying. We need some good news from West Ham at the moment, and a signing would be really good. But the other thing it did was, in terms of knowing what stories to believe, it made it really, really difficult because obviously the club have got trusted media outlets, some West Ham websites, some newspapers. The Evening Standard would be a good example on that as well. And it appeared last week that the club were briefing, was it last week or the week before? Whatever, it doesn't matter. We're briefing everybody saying, don't worry. He hasn't only got a month left on his contract, he's got a year and a month. Some call it 13 months. And that was really weird because it turned out that wasn't true. He did actually only have a month. But there's no doubt about it in my mind, and it's easy enough to verify enough, but in my mind and in my opinion, they were very much sending it out there. But I look at that's misinformation. Why is that being put out there? And once you start delivering misinformation, I know there'll be a lot of people watching this rolling their eyes thinking, yeah, well, the club are always putting out misinformation. That's quite blatant. That particular one is quite blatant. It's like saying, oh, well, we tried to sign a player. That's very different doing that to saying there's this player who is our player and a West Ham player, and they are under contract with us and remain under contract with us. That's quite a whopper. As I say, it was done unofficially, and there's no way of saying the club did it anyway. However, that was just my hunch on it. So I find the whole Danjuma thing a little bit interesting because the suggestion is now that because David Moyes can't get Lewis Potter, he might revisit Danjuma. You think, oh, crikey, this is now getting complicated. You then add in the more recent story about Armando Broja. Mandalorian Broja to you and I. And it appears now that West Ham are worried. So there's this on a website, I think it's called Give Me Sport, or was it Tribal Football? I could pull it up now, but I'll paraphrase it. It'll be good enough. They're basically saying that West Ham are now concerned because Newcastle have entered the race for Broja and Newcastle can pay more money. Whoa, hold on. Just back up. a little bit, okay? Because all the things can't be true. So the last I heard, he wouldn't be available until Chelsea had played a couple of friendlies anyway. Tuchel wanted to have a look at Broja close up, which sort of makes sense, doesn't it? But then when you look at the way not only Chelsea are recruiting, but it looks like who they have signed and they're going to sign, think, okay, I can understand, particularly given the way that Tuchel plays the game, Broja could be surplus to requirements. However, Chelsea, I don't think Chelsea are particularly trying to invite a bidding war. Chelsea will just have a price for him, which will be quite high. Now, whether it's 25, 30 or 35 minutes, it's going to be that or thereabouts. It's basically there for someone to pay. Chelsea are not going to give Broja to West Ham for less money than they give him to Newcastle. There will just be a price. I don't think they'll play the game. I'm not going to say, oh, West Ham, you can have him for 25, Newcastle, you can have him for 35. It's just not going to work like that. So you get down to wages. Now, Newcastle have been chasing a striker. His name escapes me. I think he played for a Gerd's old club. I think he played for Stade Rennais. Now, they were chasing him in January. It was a hard deal to do. Darmish said it was going to be a hard deal for them to do. I think reading between the lines, they couldn't get it done. They signed Chris Wood instead, as you do. Because the player and his agent were very much aware of this label that Newcastle got, which is the richest club in the world. So I think their attitude, the attitude of the player and the agent was, well, if you're the richest club in the world, you can pay my client 150 grand a week. Well, the player isn't worth 150 grand a week. We're not talking about Erling Haaland here. We're talking about a young, promising player. He hasn't really done anything yet, but he looks really good. Looks like he'd be a really good player. But they've seen a shiny gold glittery thing, and by that I mean Newcastle, and thinking we'll have some of that. So this player might have moved on somewhere else for whatever, 40 grand a week, 50 grand a week, something like that. But now it's because it's Newcastle, 150 grand a week. And Newcastle stuck their heels in and said, we're not going to play this game. We understand it, but we're not going to be used. So we're not going to pay inflated wages. Again, both can't be true. And I sort of believe that, really, because why would they? They seem a little bit wise to that sort of thing. So if they're going to do that, why would they pay overinflated wages for Broja? Well, I don't think they would. So in which case, why can't we match what Chelsea wants to pay for Broja and match his wages? I do find the whole thing really, really odd. I would get it. If Broja cost 80 million quid and he wanted 200 grand a week, I would get it. I would say, okay, yeah, we can't pay that. I totally understand. But the fact of the matter is he's probably going to want about 50 grand a week. That's what Ryan Fredericks was on, and his contract has just gone. I think, why couldn't we pay something like that? And then you look at the transfer fee. Well, hold on a second. If we haven't got 30 million quid to spend on a striker, bear in mind, we've been saving up the money since we sold Sebastian Haller, then again, something is very, very wrong. It's really hard. No answers in this one. It's really hard to cut through all the gossip and all the talk at the moment, but it does seem to be. I won't spend any time talking about Lingard, but as you know, Lingard's going to Newcastle or Tottenham. Don't believe he's going to Tottenham, by the way. Whatever. Lewis Potter's going to Brentford. Danjuma, we're not interested in. Broja's going to Newcastle. So looking at all these targets, you're thinking, come on, stop divering, stop gambling. If you remember the Kenny Rogers song, and I think it's time that we get another deal done.